Again, we hold a strategy meeting about our next campaign, the Alivia Pirate Empire. I power up the cogitator screen and put up the findings of my father, notes and rumors obtained during his own travel and conquests. My X.O, one of the oldest clan members and an uncle of mine, with the greatest experience in void warfare, takes over the meeting with practiced words and gestures. He doesn't look over 1,000 years old, but he served on the same bridge with my grandfather in the past. I found him while training with the Grenadier Regiment, relegated to weapons instructor by my father due to some disagreement. Decimar might have pointed him out as well.
"If I may, Lord Captain," Clan Elder Wenchen says politely. I nod in acceptance and let him take over the holographic screen.
"Please,
Major Wenchen," I agree in a mild voice.
I gave him the rank for a reason after all.
Experience matters with warfare. First thing, reconnaissance.
We can insert the Requiem at the edge of this mining system, and send out a fighter squadron coasting with unpowered engines to retrieve operational data. Number of ships, trajectories, targets mass and everything else we need to plan our assault. We can't rely on old maps and astronomical observations.
He proposes in a calm voice.
They will detect the warp fluctuations anyway. Better to exit in force, and blast whoever we catch. I argue with a glance at my engineer advisor. Cygnus nods hesitantly, and wipes his cyborg eye with a cloth. Possibly terrified of being the center of attention.
He'll get used to it.
He's not quite a tech priest, and his expertise is sort of limited to warp systems, but he does know them inside and out. The frigate will produce a wide-area radiation wake as it exits the warp, as well as a hugely visible flash. Even at light speed, everyone in the system will know they have visitors.
In a few hours,
the engineer explains in a weak tone. My uncle nods and tugs on his grey beard. Knowledge of something arriving is not evidence of an enemy. It could be some more minor ship or a cargo vessel.
Perhaps, yes.
We can send a transport ship as well, to serve as bait and draw out the pirates. I power up my implant and review the system map. If we insert behind this gas giant, they will not see us at all. They will see a transport ship, leaking atmosphere as if damaged. We can insert our fighters and let them scan the system while we follow the bait with cold engines. Once the decision is made, I speak with every staff officer for more ideas and solutions, but the unknown limits our options. Can't plan for what we don't know, after all. Decimar advises me to keep 2 fighter squadrons for defense, should anything surprise us while we are flying blind and unpowered. It makes good sense, so I approve. Then she drags me to the bedroom and presents to me 2 soldier girls from the Void Marine Battalion, vetted and eager to provide babies for the clan. Oh well, it is duty after all. Might as well make it pleasant and fun. We all work hard on this for half the night, and then I crash into sleep. The 2 concubines are assigned as permanent guards for my apartment and move-in, as there would be no point to lose them in a firefight or boarding action. They have a higher calling now. Decimar goes exploring a few more companies and talks to a few more women soldiers, looking for more concubines, but she fails to find someone she likes. In the end, she picks another cousin of ours as a second wife. Henwokta looks amazing with brown skin and hair, green eyes and a loving smile. And has bountiful breasts and hips, something rarely seen aboard void ships. Most women crew are solid packs of muscles and training, unlike the fat and lazy ground pounders. Okta used to work in the hydroponics, and likely had more fresh food available to maintain her nice looks. Not that I'm upset by that. Not at all. Some 3 weeks later, I'm almost certain to have a couple more kids on the way, and Margus Jiren is rather displeased with my priorities, arguing for the quest for knowledge and less flesh pleasures. I won't say sorry, my mentor. Blank officers won't appear out of nothing. Did you have any success with the atomantic reactor? I wonder in turn. He shakes his head and points at the simulation. Still not enough depth with our scans, so no progress. This reactor is very compact. And the Tigris tech priests are too secretive on their prized fellblades. Isn't that how all Forge worlds do things? I ask rhetorically. A metallic tentacle pokes my forehead. You are changing things, Captain. Spreading new patterns and more efficient machines. I can barely wait to see what else you might discover. I sit down next to him, in the only chair. The Magus never sits down, although with his metal frame he probably doesn't need to rest anyway.
Let's start with the missile launchers then. We have plenty of them to test and see what can be simplified.
Waiting for the trap to work and draw out the pirates takes another week, and I do find a way to increase the range of our missiles by 10%, with some clever software upgrades, or rather by uncluttering some buggy programming. With simpler commands to follow, the logic engine can maintain target lock for a bit longer. Jiren goes to update our missiles launchers with the new batch, and I visit my wives and concubines for a few hours. Then alerts blare out and the fun times are over. The pirates arrive with 2 Iconoclast class _ destroyer and an ore hauler transformed into a bastardized weapon platform, with 100 guns of various types, possibly collected from whatever victims they have killed during their predations. Then we wait for them to start matching speed and board the transport vessel, before we spring the trap and accelerate, launching space superiority fighters and battering their void shields for boarding actions. The Void Marines and 2 battalions of Grenadiers, all armored in carapace suits and void-resistant helmets, attack the pirate ships, while from inside the transport ship, hidden combat servitors spring out and massacre their own invaders. A day later, we have a captured destroyer, a rather damaged ore hauler and a lost Grenadier battalion as the second destroyer managed to blow up somehow. Sadly, we also lose 5 clan members to this victory, although even one destroyer is worth 1 billion thrones, should anyone sell ships for cash. The battalion needs to be rebuilt, officers and new recruits trained and armored. We hold another meeting to discuss what went wrong and right, with my brother seeming upset he wasn't given leave for a boarding action. Captain Varian, if you were leading the 4th Grenadier Battalion in the assault, you would be dead now? And I would lack a competent frigate captain. I tell him in a stern voice. Major Wenchen nods and agrees with me. I think we should use more combat servitors for boarding. They are smaller, able to enter service vents and have quicker reflexes. Plus, it won't hurt us that much when they die. Fine. Use servitors if you are afraid to die. My brother exclaims upset. I sigh and drink some wine with regret. Damn glory hound. You do have a point, brother. Perhaps someone with experience and training could have stopped their reactor going critical. We will add tech priests to the next boarding actions. But no officers, unless they wear power armor. I conclude and wave off the holographic display. Hundreds of helmet and servitor-mounted cameras and Vox transmissions gave us sufficient knowledge what really happened. Either a grenadier fired on something critical, or some pirate did. Either way, the ship went up in flames with our troops on board. If we had teleporters, Decimar says in a peaceful voice. Everyone sighs at that. Fat chance we will find a working teleporter anywhere. Those relics were mostly the domain of Space Marines and the Inquisition. So, we conquer the system and establish a mining base. Does anyone here wants to be the system governor? I ask out loud. Nobody raises a hand or tentacle, so I'll have to promote a grenadier officer. Most likely the 3rd Battalion leader, who was wounded during the capture of the Iconoclast destroyer. With Major Richard Finman thus promoted to governor, we start the tedious task of rooting out the rest of the pirates and assault the mining outposts. We liberate a few thousand slaves, including a few navigators and astropaths as well as a fallen noble who used a freelance around in his knight suit. His knight is gone but the guy is skilled and a fierce warrior. His nickname was Whitelance, after he discarded his house a few centuries ago. It will take some time to get used to the long lifespans of the rich or nobles. Lord Whitelance, I do have good relations with a few Forged Worlds. Once you prove them your genetic ability to pilot a knight, we will provide a new suit for you. I offer politely beside his hospice bed. The pilot nods and falls asleep. The pirates weren't kind to him, unlike the reverent care that the navigators received. In fact, the Iconoclast navigator will keep his post, having gone from a planetary force vessel, conscripted to the Imperial Navy, impressed to the mutineers, then captured by pirates and then by us without anyone bothering to replace him. Navigators are too rare and useful to waste. Luckily I still have 100 clansmen to send to our new ships, although the ore hauler will be reformed to its old task, and simply upgraded with a dozen defensive multi-lasers. The relic cannons are being removed for scans and attempted reverse engineering, and one of them is a large bombardment_cannon that fires plasma bombs. I find it strange that I never heard of it, since it's very potent, both for planetary bombardments and void combat.
What do you say,
Mentor? A dozen of these on every cheap corvette and they'll have the firepower of a frigate. Maybe more. I ask Jiren while examining the trophy gun. Jiren spins an arm for some reason. Not a dozen. One per ship. I doubt our own reactor can power a dozen such cannons. Damn it. Limitations are not fun. Would it be stronger than the heavy lance on the Requiem? I wonder. Hopeful. The new frigate has exactly one heavy lance, just as powerful as the ones on my cruiser. Only, the cruiser has 8 of them, in 4 twin batteries. At least 3 times stronger. It would have a longer range but a slower rate of fire. Perhaps twice slower than a heavy lance. The Magus explains while interfacing a few mechadendrites with the captured weapon. I hum inward. Not that great then. I need these ships to match frigates in firepower. But perhaps I can improve it a bit. I haven't found a single machinery without flaws, not yet. The new mining system is now named Liberation, and will take at least a year to become productive again. Fortunately, we have 1 million servitors and half as many captured pirates or their dependents. By imperial law they should all be killed for rebelling, but I am merciful and will spare the young children for re-education, while the remaining pirates are given to the tech priests to be converted into productive members of society. Only without higher cognitive functions. Miners and combat servitors do not need feelings. The cult Mechanicus still uses babies for their seraphic servitors, grafting wings and floating devices, topped with a burning candle. Not in my domain beyond the borders of the Imperium. It's simply cruelty without reason. The kids will grow up as ship crew or new recruits in my army. There is enough pointless cruelty in this hellish galaxy without me having to add to it. Of the remaining slaves, most are useless to us, so they are sent to Retribution to live their lives in a modicum of freedom and peace. Those that have experience with weapons or ships can stay. The tech priests have just completed a few orbital defenses when a pirate battle group warps in system and loudly demands to know why we haven't sent the tithe minerals to the capital. It's funny, I know. Even pirates operate the exact same way as the empire they fled from. The warships are hidden in the asteroid field, engines powered down, so they won't detect us until it's too late. The pirates move in cautiously, and send out a wave of old fighters to scout ahead. Those fighters vanish and crack missile explosions when they approach the mining outpost and we power up for another fight. It won't be as easy this time, as they have 3 destroyers, a frigate and an old cruiser without void shields and very few weapons. Hopefully it's not a trap and it is really damaged. The boarding actions are mostly headed by armored void marines and combat servitors, while the second wave is made up of tech priests and grenadier escorts, along with more servitors. We capture the destroyers and the cruiser, but the frigate escapes, being more durable and faster than expected. It sucks, but it's war. Things rarely go according to plan. Emergency repairs and upgrades for the captured ships begin immediately, and the old ore hauler is cannibalized to bring the cruiser back into fighting shape. The transport ship leaves Liberation soon after, loaded with captured minerals and a few thousand ex-slaves, heading towards my own forge world, the Retribution. I don't expect the forges to mass-produce anything yet, except perhaps plows and swords. The Mechanicus is obsessed with handcrafting everything, from light bulbs to lasers and spaceships. I aim to change that here, where my words are law. A munition and tank factory would be great, as well as infantry weapons and armor. Even tractors would be nice, as we would be able to farm on large scale and feed everyone, without depending on Antax for food. My 4 captured destroyers get armed with 2 torpedoes each, from my own cruiser, since the pirates have long depleted their torpedoes stockpile. They also get 20 hunter-killer launchers and 1,000 missiles each, so they'll be more effective in escort role against fighters or maybe bombers. The Requiem receives a dozen multi-lasers for point defense, and the rest goes to the cruisers. Jiren has been forging new weapons non-stop, melting down old weapons for rare minerals and pouring brand new laser cannons and multi-lasers, one at a time, by hand. And for every new weapon, a dozen organic spare parts are spent, harvested for nerves and neurons. Human resources. It's kinda gruesome, but it is better to give the weapons machine spirits than have them inhabited by demons. The Emperor protects, but you need to give him a conduit for that protection. An entire grenadier battalion is moved to the captured cruiser, along with a dozen clan members that serve as officers. 1,000 tech priests join them, since maintaining a 6-kilometer-long void ship is a lifelong duty. They seem quite happy to sanctify every nut and bolt on their new home. Boarding holes made by melter charges need to be patched up, sensors and weapons cleaned and upgraded to retribution standard. We have minerals, tech priests and servitors enough. What we don't have are forges, which are complicated machines resembling an incinerator with numeric commands, and some lathes for finer work. And sadly, forges are not easy to obtain. Not even Jiren has the knowledge to make a new forge. And thus, when the last wave of pirates returns for our heads, we aren't quite ready, although a whole year has passed. A huge flash, and 2 grand cruisers emerge, escorted by 5 more destroyers and the same frigate that escaped. We have 2 cruisers as well, 4 destroyers and 1 frigate, so we are technically outnumbered. But my ships are upgraded and somewhat modern, at least half of them. My captured ships not so much, and the old cruiser might unravel and fall apart under sustained fire. This sucks. I order my squadron to maintain range, and wear down the escorting pirates. The idiot pirates rush ahead, escorts reaching weapon range first, as destroyers are much faster. They do not have good defense though. Our heavy lances core the destroyers one after another, and a single one gets close enough to fire on Requiem. Varian fires back and blows up the guilty destroyer with his own heavy lance. Then the pirates stop to reconsider, as the situation has become unfavorable for them. I send Requiem and the more intact destroyer after the frigate, while my cruiser and the rest of the squadron begin our attack run on the prizes, the 2 grand cruisers. The fighter squadron helps as well, both with interceptor or strafing missions. Then torpedoes begin striking the pirate cruisers, my destroyers focusing one and my own cruiser the other. In huge plumes of plasma fire, their void shields fail, and we can begin melting through the thick armor. The lament for the vanquished, my other cruiser struggles to keep up, and can barely fire a few macro cannon rounds before the boarding action begins. Nonetheless, the pirates focus fire on it, and damage it pretty badly. The grand cruisers have enormous internal volume, and the pirates have plenty troops to oppose us, although poorly armed and trained. Combat servitors, then void marines, then the rest, even a dozen Hydra tanks get transported by assault shuttle to breach barricades and clear the main corridors. The fighting is harsh, and we lose as many servitors as they lose crew. 100,000 loses on both sides, plus many damaged machines and weapons. In the end, it is worth it. We capture both grand cruisers and about 200,000 serfs and pirates, as well as the navigators, the astropaths and even a few Xenos. A single Avenger-class _grand cruiser matches my entire fleet in mass, and now I have 2. Sure, the things are old and in poor repair. But I also have a few friendly forge worlds in my pocket, so to speak. I doubt the tech priests even know what friendship is. Another year passes while we convert the pirates into more servitors, and execute necessary repairs for a single warp journey. I chose to return to Forge Metallica, because the destroyers would be nearly ready. Forge Grya has most likely moved away, and Antax might not have much to trade anymore. But Metallica is rich, and I have a few destroyers to upgrade. Their allies, House_Raven, also take my attention. They have knights, and we need knights if titans are not possible. Like midget titans, with midget weapons. But still fearsome, when piloted by experts. The Requiem and 3 destroyers leave to patrol my empire, while the old cruiser and the last destroyer stay to pacify and conquer the pirate empire. Without capital ships, it shouldn't be too hard. They have an armored battalion and a grenadier battalion, as well as 100,000 combat servitors. And when you consider the servitors never flinch or lose morale, they make very effective frontline troops. My wife Decimar stays to oversee the conquest, and heads directly for the Alivar hive world captured by the pirates. A month later, I arrive at Forge Metallica with 2 grand cruisers, and a dozen new patterns, some real, some self-made. The new model corvette flies from the orbital dock and greets my ship, not very politely. Halt and surrender. Or be destroyed. The Archmagos on the Vox orders us sternly and even fires a warning shot on my ship. They might think we are pirates, considering the reputation and profile on my captured cruisers. This is Rogue Trader Peth. I bring gifts. I answer in a flat tone. Why do I get this lucky? Slowly, the emotions calm down as the fabricator has met me before. Hey, Mechanicus emotions. I leave the Grand Cruisers parked further away and approach Metallica's orbit in the litany. Then a whole month of tedious negotiations. I just returned for Beyond, and brought a host of STC designs, and given them for free. The Mechanicus is probably confused what to do with me. Not even their own explorator expeditions return this quickly and with so many discoveries. Lord Pef, you are a conundrum for me, and a test from Omnisire. The fabricator complains in a small voice. I nod and shrug. Yeah, I know. Out of context problem. Is it that hard to allow a friendly trader to advise on things he has experience with? I am the one going out and fighting pirates, or returning lost worlds to compliance. I quip and sip some wine. The Archmagos doesn't drink, but I bet he wants to. The cogitator screen powers up, and brings the Corvette schematic out for examination. I cringe while I look over it. Whoever designed the STC pattern for the Corvette class had no idea what space warfare is. Then I draw a connecting wire and plug it into my head, and download my modified STC design, containing what I want for a cheap ship. Armor is not 2 meters of iridium tungsten alloy, but a triple layer of plasteel, IT alloy and ceramite plating, with 10 meters of ultra-cheap plasteel. Shock and recoil will deform the less resilient plasteel, but it does return to shape by itself. This also prevents spalling and stops dozens of other problems like boarding pods and explosive decompression. The void shield is split up into 3 layers, each decreasing the potency of the penetrating shots, until it splashes futile on the ceramite plating and dissipates. The reactor core has a secondary room, used for emergency or combat levels on extra power. Same thing with the Geller generator, using 2 units for redundancy. The macro cannon batteries use shell magazines, loaded from an upper deck, and then falling into place and being fired like a semi-automatic gun. They would still need 40 crew per gun, but it would not be 400 like they do now. My new LR plasma cannon pattern is mounted on a sealed turret and can track targets in 360 degrees in the whole lower hemisphere, because it's mounted on the ventral side. The ship even has 40-point defense multi-lasers, a pair of space fighters and a shuttle in a hangar behind the bridge. The officers could now evacuate at speed in case of imminent destruction. Also has 10 hunter-killer launchers on gimbal mounts, if they need to engage boarders or hive organisms of smaller size. The armored prow has 2 torpedo launchers inside, because torpedoes are the coolest thing ever. They make a big boom when they hit. The torpedoes are also 50 meters long and are expended in one salvo. The fabricator compares my Deimos pattern Corvette and runs a few simulations. Of course, my thing is much better, even if it costs 20% more. It is at least 200% better and uses 200% fewer crew. Does Untax have this already? He asks me with a pained sigh. So this is not about the ship, but competition with their rivals. No. I have another pattern for them, but it doesn't have the macrocannon new pattern. Nor torpedoes. I explain and let him draw his own conclusions. At least there's that. And you want those Grand Cruisers to use the faster macrocannon feed? The fabricator asks and stares at me for too long. I set down my wine glass and try to look calm and powerful. This humble one would never presume to want anything from the machine cult, fabricator. If you consider the new pattern safe and efficient, then I will use it. The same with all the upgrades myself and my officers dream about. We are not shipbuilders but ship users. I answer in a level voice, trying to appear scared but brave. Which I am. The Mechanicus are scary. And I try to be brave, in front of a war machine able to dismantle space marines in a minute. I've seen Jiren dismantle people before, a dozen in a few seconds. He didn't just kill them, he harvested their useful parts while they were still alive and standing. A blur of tentacles, then corpses fell down without brains or nerves. And you know your place too. Must be hard, as you go beyond and speak with the voice of your emperor. Then you come back as a mere ship captain, like millions of others in the Imperium, without any privilege. He wonders with some irony. I nod shyly. There is temptation, of course. I fight it every day, and restrain myself, lest I become someone like those pirates I hunted down. Another holoscreen opens, with a new trade list. I can pick 6 brand new destroyers, a dozen Baneblade heavy tanks, and a fully refit Grand Cruiser, the best of what the Mechanicus can throw at it. No knights though. Damn it. I knew Metallica was rich, but this is beyond belief. Not even my grandfather has gained so much favor. Something in my gifts must be worth much more than I thought. I did give them 10 new STCs. I tap the remodeled cruiser and examine the refit. Pretty much everything I want. Except teleporters. Oh well. I probably need to visit Mars for that. I will need it ready in 90 years. I mused to myself. The Grand Cruiser is nearly battleship in size, and will be able to match older battleships after refit. The screen changes to the sector map and projected courses for known invasions. Brimlock is highlighted, and a few others. The fabricator turns to stare at me with a flash of lens glare. All this, just to stop the Tyranids. He replies with a sad voice. I gulp the wine and nod in silence. That, but not only that. And the night suits, if that's possible. Chaos incursions cannot be predicted, not by tracing vectors on a map. But I know they'll happen. They might even happen when I remember, so I can prepare. Come back in a decade or two, young captain. My shipyards are full of contracted vessels. But there's time to complete your favor as well. For once, I'm glad to find a human that's not in a rush. He urges me and waves me away. And thus, I collect the Baneblades, then I fly back to the Litany, and depart, heading for Forge Tigris first, to collect the other frigate. Waiting 20 years for 6 new destroyers from Metallica isn't that bad. I leave the Grand Cruisers behind, one with minimal crew and 1,000 tech priests helped by their servitors. This is parked in a neutral orbit and awaits refit. The other Grand Cruiser is taken over by Forge Metallica, as their property. 2 Cobra destroyers escort me on the journey to Tigris, with a single clan member appointed as captain for each of them. They are both my aunts, and have centuries of ship experience. Still, I'm running out of clansmen. I need a bigger family if I'm to gain more ships, finding more wives as well. I also need a better clan name than Lancefire. Best not to mess with that yet. The warrant is in that name after all. The newly recruited night pilot is a bit despondent at my failure, but we still have other places to try. Meanwhile, he trains the armor regiment in maneuver tactics, speed, flanking, and all that. I already provided some measure of combined arms and flexibility, but it's better to have an actual expert in charge. Although a decade has passed in the galaxy, for me it has been much less, due to the saved time by warp travel. At Forge Tigris, I get a much better reception, and nobody fires on my ships. That's improvement, right there. I still waste a month with negotiations and bartering, gifting a few STCs patterns for a whole company of Leman Russ Vanquishers and 500 new Chimeras. This includes a stripped-down Corvette pattern, without triple shields or a double Geller field. It's cheap, fast and quite effective against small-sized targets. Then I manage to collect the sword frigate, from under the nose of some arrogant Navy admiral, and run away before he gets violent. I get no respect from these high-brass Navy types. A month later I arrive at Antax for upgrades to my armor regiment, and ask for a single night suit. The fabricator asks to see my pilot, tests him for compatibility and loyalty, and then promises to build him a new suit in 20 years. Whitelance cries in relief. His life has meaning again. Especially if the fabricator manages to craft a force sword for his suit. That thing could cut through demons or necrons, just like any force_weapon. So I use the opportunity to make him swear himself to my house, and give him a few pretty cousins as brides, to bind him closer. Hopefully, his genes will pass on and allow me to create my own night house. Forge World Antax has already produced a dozen corvettes, all different variants as they test configurations and reactor outputs, and perhaps engines or weapons. I add my own variant, designed for long-range missions, thus with very few consumable ammunition, like macrocannons or torpedoes. Instead, it has advanced plasma cannons, 2 of them, 50 multi-lasers and 10 missile launchers. And by advanced, I mean simplified to hell, reducing wear and heat build-up with oversized iridium and plasteel turrets that serve as radiators. And by oversized, I mean 100 meters wide. Bigger than a Lance battery turret. With triple void shields and a doubled reactor, this corvette is almost as durable as a destroyer, while the shields last. Costs 10 times less, because it uses a single beam of adamantium for structural support. My transport ships have already arrived with melted hulls from the pirate ships, but once the adamantium is reforged, it will be good as new. I heard you captured 2 grand cruisers, Lord Pef? The fabricator asks without any ulterior motive. Yes. Gave them to Metallica. I need ships now, and they promised 6 new destroyers, plus a dozen Baneblades. I answer mostly truthful. The fabricator sighs in defeat. He knows he cannot give me as much. And the lament? He wonders in a small voice. The old battered cruiser? Ah, he got the transport guys to spill all the beans. But it's good anyway. Is that ship of any use to you, fabricator? I doubt it can even travel safely this far. Only calculated jumps, 4 light years or less. I explain with a shrug. The Magus stares up, then blurts some binary toward Jiren. I will send a manufactory ship then. Jiren will have command of it, while it is beyond Empire borders. He explains in a pleading voice. Oh? He really wants to grab a big ship then. I hum and pretend to think it over. Fine. You can repair the old ship and bring it home. But afterwards, the forged ship stays. Crew included. I have 50 planets in need of tractors and pipes and everything. It's brutal out there, without civilization and wealth like here. And I have a hive world, plenty of human resources. The fabricator considers this for a long time. Questa Mechanicus? He asks after a whole minute. That would mean near servitude for his forged world. The clan would mutiny if I just gave away all they fought and died for. One world. You pick which. I answer back. Good. Jiren will decide after he knows more. But if you want those ships, you provide the minerals, organics and officers. Agreed? The fabricator demands in a forceful voice. I agree, of course. Who else would build me whatever I need for free? The Mechanicus are really the best. My armor regiment takes a few months to be upgraded to my needs, with hunter-killer missiles and multi-lasers, the tracks and drivetrain modified for more reliability, Auspex sensors for day and night combat and so on. I even managed to obtain ceramite facing for the frontal glacis of my tanks. This will make frontal assaults of fortified positions much less costly. Adamantium is too heavy and expensive for lesser machines, unlike for Baneblades or Titans. Plus, without shields most ground units are considered expendable anyway. Too many things can and will pierce armor or ignore it completely. It is the very reason I designed the new corvettes with triple shielding. Armor composition doesn't need to be adamantium if you have 3 void shields. The Grenadier Regiment gets replenished to full strength as well, although it comes at a few Imperial Guard officers of dubious provenance and loyalty. Might need to sacrifice them on some glorious mission. The Eastern Fringe is dangerous enough, without problems caused by insider grumbling and friction. My new ships also receive some upgrades in meantime, and the torpedoes and missiles are restocked, which is always a problem once you leave the logistic train. The new frigate is named Ode for the Vanquished, to keep the theme, and I have to part with another competent relative and send her to become captain. Lysana Kintu is either a sister or a cousin, but she is the same age as me and looks much like me. Pale blonde hair, blue eyes and a thin but robust body. She served in gunnery and boarding actions before, and she's as trained as any clan member. Hopefully not a glory hound like my brother, but you never know. Jiren stays on Antax to await his manufactory ship being ready for permanent departure from Empire space. Thus, the trip to Olivia is strange, without my mentor and his constant lessons. I have Henna and the 2 concubines, so I'm not bored or lonely, but I still feel I lost something. Of my 3 kids on board, 2 are blanks, and Decima has another blank boy with her. So it's 3 out of 4 so far, a sign of a truly useful mutation. Henna is aiming to become pregnant again, but the Void Marine girls decide to wait and get back in shape. Their training has slacked, and they try to return to peak health and strength. They also rotate as nurses and guards for the nursery, which lets me sleep better. I train my body as well, with the new grenadiers. It's an old trick, but always works. It binds troops to their commander, if they see him sweat beside them. Then hours of officer lessons, both as teacher and student. Wenchen and Whitelands teach advanced courses in shipboarding, planetary assault and maneuver, and I need to learn it all. Even if I don't intend to practice the stuff in person, sometimes the war comes to you. Then I go to my lab and tinker with STC designs, struggling to create ever simpler and more rugged patterns for various war machines, as well as common tools like lamps and flashlights and anything powered by electricity. Except computers. Although I am almost certain I could reproduce working PC designs, the Immaterium would notice and certainly infect them with ghosts, demons or other worse stuff. Keeping everything analog is tedious, but much safer. Not completely safe, of course. Nothing is. Late into the evening I mostly listen to clan stories or amazing feats from Wenchen and Whitelands, immersing myself in the culture of humanity. Then I return to my wife, and make love and babies. Hopefully another blank, safe from the warp and psychers. It will take decades for them to grow up and competent, but I have time. Even my new cruiser will need 90 years to be refit and upgraded. Doing things by hand is slow. Even if you have 20 metallic tentacles instead, like the tech priests of the cult Mechanicus. But then, if even the Emperor accepted them and signed the Olympus Treaty, so there must have been a good reason for it. I focus on Vox and video transmissions next, as communications are always important in combined arms warfare. Changing a thing and there, then testing and changing again. After a month of constant improvement I complete a more resilient but clearer Vox transmitter pattern. I will wait to arrive at a Levar to discover it in some catacomb and then sell it to the Mechanicum in a few distinct variants. Generally it takes 3 or more variations for a new pattern to be accepted as distinct, especially if it has a different focus, like range or strength or reliability. The tech priests are not stupid, and some of them have tried this themselves. But they never had a good cover story like I do, returning from the beyond with ships and weapons and patterns after conquering new planets. It is exactly the mandate of my warrant, and nobody can blame me for being successful. I kinda expect that Antax's fabricator general knows or suspects something, but I will never admit it, and he will never ask. He has plausible deniability if he doesn't ask. New STC patterns, found by a rogue trader in barbarian ruins. The cult sends expeditions out for the exact same reason, after all. But as this is a hive world, I can improve other urban machines, like it is expected a hive world would have. And if they are simpler and more efficient, all the better. Of course, this is 40k and the good times never last. We arrive at a Levar to find it under attack by an Orkwog. Is not a huge invasion, like the kind able to conquer a forged world, but orcs multiply fast. Like fungi. Because they are fungi, only slightly sentient ones. And as they gather mass and numbers, they become smarter and more potent in warp manipulation, from immense luck to simply ignoring the laws of physics or common sense. A few hours later, as we approach the inhabited world, we regroup with our cruiser and other destroyer and gather for a strategy conference. 3 hive cities have fallen and the orcs are looting everything to create more weapons. Decimar reports and marks the fallen cities. Perhaps 10 billion people on the planet, and 3 billions are already lost. This is not a huge hive with 1 trillion people like in the Empire. The cities are big, but are still mostly self-sufficient. A trio of orc rocks, sort of powered meteorites, that serve as landing craft for their armies have landed on top of the indicated hives, possibly because the pirates have already looted their void shields and everything that could have helped. In space, there's a dozen of orc cruisers, also of human origin maybe, but refurbished by the greenskins in their usual manner, guns everywhere and rusted steel spikes. Can't tell what they were before. A kill_cruiser should pose no problem if logic applied to orcs. Simply blast it from afar until it falls apart. But these ships are painted black, so they should be way more durable. They also move quite fast and throw tremendous firepower out. More Dakar than I have, by 100 times. A squad of these bastard ships can even take on a battleship. And I don't have a battleship anyway. I open the galactic map and look for a diversion. Larnano was right in the way. Oi, you big boss captain. You want to fight? I sent via the Vox channel, to the surprise of everyone on the bridge. You big hero Hummy? Another gruff voice answers. You think you're hard and strong killing weakling Hummies in cities? The big bugs would eat you all, like they do at Larnano. Big fight there, 1,000 Navy ships lost. I explained politely. As expected, greed and stupidity shouldn't mix. The Navy might have lost some ships, but there's 10,000 hive bioships. Why? The cruisers receive coordinates for Larnano and depart, leaving their brethren on the ground without support. Expendable grunts, like expected. Now it's mop-up and training for our armored regiment, the Grenadiers and the combat servitors. We even managed to save one hive city and half the inhabitants. If only all our enemies were such morons. I mean, we still lost like 2 billion people to a bunch of overgrown mushrooms, so it's not all nice. The Baneblades have a field day, basically immune to anything the orcs can throw at them. Like spears and javelins. Bullets too, but they only make pretty sparks. We barely lose 100 chimeras and 1,000 grenadiers, due to combined arms attacks, including orbital firepower. The locals become much friendlier at once, and now we have a recruiting planet for 1,000 regiments. And while I meet the nobles and merchants to discuss their new fate, Decimar selects a dozen new concubines for me. This will bind the planet to me even more, and I decide to plant the flag here, and make this world my capital. The tech priests and the combat servitors descend into the lower levels of scum and villainy to conscript more human resources, while I begin the long task of rebuilding and civilizing this planet. Cleaning the pollution and the warfare scars will take decades, but overall the planet is in better shape than Retribution. They even have some factories and electrical generators, so I don't start from scratch like I feared. Training sadly falls to the side, merely 1 hour every morning. Then it's politics and administration, which is no fun without computers. Luckily I have implants and 100 tech priests in my staff to help keep up with everything. Then Jiren arrives with his manufactory ship a year later and everything is well. The orcs do not return, not that I expected them to defeat a hive splinter, no matter what Daka they had. The quest for knowledge drives the Mechonicus to the stars, Jiren says as his greeting. I blink and consider his words. You were named an explorator for the Mechonicus? I wonder and pat his mechadendrite that he holds out. See. You can learn. One day you will discard this silly flesh body and turn to the machine for salvation. He proclaims in a confident tone. I shudder and shake my head. Not for many years, mentor. The Magus laughs out loud, seeming amused. Every year, Decimar holds another huge ball, and invites the socialites to preen themselves in front their new governor. By the 5th year, I am swimming among 50 concubines and even gain a 3rd wife, from a noble house with roots going to the age of strife and beyond. Serena Rindolian is red-headed and kinda plump. Now a Lancefire by marriage. She is also about 80 years old, though due to anti-aging treatments she looks about 25. And she will keep looking that age for a millennium or two. Her family has founded the twin hive city with same name. One twin is called Rin and the other Dolian, probably after the original founders. Now the cities are united into a large metropolis with over 1 billion people, although most of those are lower caste workers and servants. Even outside the empire, the hierarchies and the mode of operation remains largely similar, due to inertia. You might change the governor for a king or prince, but the pyramidal structure of a hive city will not change. And below the factory levels, there's the underhive, a maze of pipes and conduits and sewage plants, all infested by gangs and criminals. Not as numerous now, due to the Mechonicus tech priests forcefully recruiting them for other purposes, like agriculture and mining and war. But, they did find a few blanks, and where there is one there will be more. A special compound is created for those with the blessing, and a dozen astropaths now scour the hives for more blanks. The original blanks are not very important by themselves, but they are sent to a remote mountain valley for training and breeding and schooling and other eugenic purposes. My own kids will join the compound, to reduce the pressure on the navigator and his astropath choir. but only when I have to travel. I want to enjoy loving my kids, and nobody is allowed to interfere. In real space, blanks are mostly harmless, not that navigators are allowed in my nursery. I am tempted to create a similar compound for navigators, but they refuse. Either way, they do come to mingle at the governor balls and eventually will spread their seed. Decimar has promised large rewards for any woman that manages to seduce a navigator. Even bridge positions for her kids or similar boons. For a small merchant house it would be huge. There is also a navigator lady, but she never leaves her quarters on the iconoclast destroyer. I suspect she has mutated beyond what's acceptable in society. The warp just works that way, and flesh is weak. An even better reason to want blanks for officers, as many as possible. Also, a reason to post armed guards around that navigator quarters, most of them combat servitors. And a squad of Void Marines for every other navigator. Just in case. By the 10th year, we finally managed to unlock an atomantic arc reactor from the Fellblade, and copy the original design. Upgrading the thing will be even harder, as the tech is so advanced and complicated it might as well be magic. Jiren heads that task, while I focus on the plasma guns from the Stormblade. Again, copying the schematic in original format is possible, but not useful. Forge World Riser holds the patent for the original Stormblade, and thus I need something significantly different for my own STC. A tri-barrel project is possible and will even increase the rate of fire, but it would be unwieldy and cumbersome, as the twin guns are big even so. A single-barrel plasma blast gun is better, as I could adapt that for Lehman Russ tanks and perhaps even ship-to-ship combat. Perhaps even for a small Titan, or maybe a Knight. I don't have any of those yet, so it's all theoretical. But for tanks, it could be similar to the Macarius_Omega, only with much fewer problems. Time flies, and 8 years later I am finished with this project, the Alivar plasma gun pattern. Jiren is also finished with a slightly larger but easier to manufacture and maintain arc reactor. I also have 200 children, and about 30 of them blanks and ready for service. Not as many as I hoped, but much better than nothing. The Blank Valley has produced 100 more kids, and half of them are blanks, possibly due to having both parents with a special gene. All their girls are set aside to become my concubines in the future, while the boys are sent to my new naval officer school. As officers, they will be given a generous stipend to form their own harems and produce more blanks for the clan. Like a minor house. It's not exactly eugenics, but works much the same. I know of dog races that have been created using the same methods. A last governor ball marks my departure, and luck has it a navigator finds himself a darling to warm his nights. Navigator genes acquired. Jiren sets a Margus biologist on the task of disseminating those genes to willing donors, by surgical implantation. My eldest son, Primus Victor, accompanies Margus Ulanaz, to maintain a protective anti-psycho field for the security of the surgeries. Victor also is tasked with finding himself 100 concubines, with his mother's help. Decimar seems rather happy with that task. It will mean grandkids and she can barely wait. Most of my forces remain home, as defense against another possible invasion, and only the Raiment escorts my cruiser back to Imperial space. Jiren sends a crew of his tech priests on board the Lament as it departs for Antax as well. Then we leave and hope for the best. With 2 frigates and 5 destroyers as a fleet in being, my personal empire should be mostly safe. There are 100 new PDF regiments guarding the cities now, beside our armor and grenadiers. 1,000 more regiments will be trained and equipped over the next decades, but manufacturing laser weapons is slow. A dozen transport ships loaded with minerals and organics follow my cruiser in a big convoy, with a regiment loaded as protection against boarders of any type. A couple of weeks later we arrive at Antax. Did I mention this is the damn Warhammer 40,000 universe? A large Orc is assaulting Forge Antax, called Gut Stomper. The Blood Angels Space Marines are fighting beside the Mechonicus war engines, tanks and Skitarian Titans. Luckily, Forge Antax had just produced 100 new corvettes designed by myself, and they help maintain a protective umbrella over the shipyards and Titan manufactoriums. There is no need for desperate pleas for help. Without Antax I am screwed anyway. I launch everything I can, Fighters and torpedoes, lance batteries fire until their barrels glow red. I deplete all the missiles and the raiment get badly damaged by a lucky Orc cruiser before its luck runs on and eats a salvo of servitor-piloted torpedoes. On the ground I cannot help as much, since my armor is back home, but I use the guards and the Void Marines to safeguard the orbitals, tech priests leading swarms of combat servitors to cleanse the greenskin infestation from the shipyards and mass elevators. The multi-lasers fire rapidly to blow up Orc fighter bombers, which shouldn't even be able to fly in vacuum with propellers and chemical rockets. But logic is joke for a bigwog, and the Orcs don't care anyway. Their contraptions are red, so they fly fast. My arrival breaks the back of the orbital deadlock, and I manage to destroy 3 Orc cruisers before they turn towards me. The Lament cruiser helps as well and cripples a dozen smaller Orc escorts. The Mechanicus fleet takes advantage and blasts the exposed backside and engines of the Orc ships, then begin launching boarders. I fly away and wait, since I'm fresh out of boarding units. Out of torpedoes and missiles as well. In a week, the WOG loses most of their naval forces, and a few cruisers retreat, while a dozen more hulks drift in space, with Mechanicus servitors and tech priests going over everything for salvage. 100 shattered escorts as well, both human and not. There is enough adamantium and other rare components in these prizes to craft 1,000 new ships. Even if the Orc weapons are worthless, they can be studied and then melted and reforged again. On the ground, the fighting continues for 2 more months, as there were 100 million Orcs if not more. Orbital bombardments help, but they have to be restricted in close proximity to forges and factories. Sadly, 60 corvettes and 20 destroyers have been lost by attacks. About a decade of hard work lost to yet another batch of green mushrooms. The Space Marines got away easy, only losing a lander and a dozen brothers. I suspect they were lost to the Black_Rage, more than the Orc weapons. Still, I will not ask and respect their dead. Without them, the Orcs might have gained access to Titans and Titan-making facilities. And then things would have been really bad. Thus, I land for a meeting with the Fabricator General and the Space Marine Captain Donatos_Raphael and offer my support. And then share a dozen gifts equally with both, since we fought together and thus we are bound by blood honor. The Marine almost refuses, before the Fabricator explains. Lord Donatos, such is the way of this Captain Pef Lancefire. Everything he finds out in the wilderness he gives away to the Imperium, mostly to forge worlds. We help him in turn with ships and tanks and tech priests. But as we have fought together, the Space Marine towers over me and shakes my hand in thanks. We cannot produce these STC designs anyway, Lord Pef. Might as well give them to the tech priests so that they increase the arsenal of humanity. I nod slowly. In truth, I don't have anything that could help a Space Marine chapter. They have the best equipment and priority to replacements. Still, I do have a wild card. I understand, Captain. But there is something you do need. The same thing the Fabricator has tasked me with. Blank genes, immune to the Immaterium. I hold my hand out to the tech priest and he blurs into action, draining me of a liter of blood and packing it into a dozen vials for the Space Marine. Raphael loses composure for a second, before receiving the gift of blood with reverence. Our Genociers and librarians will need to test it, of course. But, if it does work. Yes, I have 100 children out in the fringe. And their children sometimes receive the same gift. It will take time to spread out the genes to an entire hive world, but not that much. Perhaps 10 generations. It is exponential growth after all. With no mutations. I explain softly. The Space Marine blinks in surprise and hope. The Emperor protects. Even the mere hope is enough to sustain me now. Thank you, Lord Pef. He proclaims and bows a millimeter. This is unexpected. But then, fortune favors the bold. Inform the Fabricator General should the genocide be compatible. In 2 decades I will assemble 100 potential blank recruits and bring them here at Antax. If they work, I will consider a permanent solution. I reply politely. This might not work at all. Or it might backfire somehow. All 3 of us hold hands and tentacles as a new pact is forged over my blood, and the blood shed in battle.